Jeez, already I hit something when I'm gonna move this out of the way. Just already just hitting stuff when I hit the play button. Of course, go figure. What's up, guys? Welcome back to GraveWalkers podcast. I'm not even gonna try and pronounce it. GraveWalkers, paranormal, true crime. I screwed it up already. Why do I always screw it up? Gosh. I made the title, I created the title, and I screw it up every single time. I can never get it right. Anyways, welcome to GraveWalkers podcast, episode number 2. And if you watched episode number 1, thank you. If you didn't watch episode number 1, what are you doing here? You need to watch episode number 1 to check out episode number 2. I'm just kidding. You don't have to. It's okay. You can do whatever your heart desires. I got notes this time for today's episode because last week's episode, I tried going no notes. It went pretty good for the most part, but it was based off of like my own knowledge and my own remembering of things, which worked out for the most part, I guess. But today I got notes, so today it's going to be a little bit better. And I'm going to be rambling off, but I'm not going to be like rambling off. So it's not like I'm going to be using a lot of like, what's going on? But today, I'm just kidding. Today is an amazing episode because I just learned about this topic 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, some of that. I just learned about this topic, and I just learned that I think Netflix put out a TV series or a movie of some kind about this topic. And I think it was like a documentary, or there's a few documentaries, but there's not that many, which is very weird. And I was talking to somebody about conspiracies and all of this, and she actually brought up this topic, and I was like, I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. So when she mentioned it, I was like, dude, I gotta check it out. There's a thing that got brought to my attention called MK Ultra. We're going into mind control, man. This is such a crazy case. Well, I don't want to call it. I'm not going to call it a case. It's such a crazy time period that America was in, and it had. Let's just get into it. Okay, so MK Ultra focused on mind control, and when we hear the word mind control, obviously we hear, the watch on the chain or something. You have a subject who's sitting there. Watch on a chain. They're like, you're gonna fall asleep. You're gonna be all sleepy, and you start clapping your hands. And then when you wake up, you're gonna start doing the dishes. I don't know. That was just me. But they brought mind control to a whole new level. This just goes beyond a watch on a chain. And I heard about this, and I heard about, I watched a documentary. There's like a few of them. There's not many. It's very strange. It's very strange that there's not too many documentaries on it. which is, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's probably a bad thing, but it was called Project MK Ultra, and it was a. This is so. This is classified information, or was classified information, but this information is public information. So you can go to any website and you can read up on this. It's public information. But it was a CIA program that would conduct experiments on ugh, maybe I'm doing experiments on my throat. They would conduct experiments on subjects throughout the 1950s. So it kind of started out like the 1940s to 1950s, 60s, whatever. And it became classified information in 1974 or 75. I think it was 1974. But they would conduct these experiments on unwitting subjects. So these were subjects who didn't know that they were being experimented on. And we're going to go down a rabbit hole here, man. It's about to get really real. Because these secret experiments were going on, no one knew what these experiments were, except for obviously the people that were conducting them. And nobody knew what was happening in 1974 until a year later in 1975, when they would start doing investigations on this. And I don't know if it was, I'd have to look into this. I don't know if it was Washington, D.C. that conducted these investigations, but it was like a congressional investigation. So yeah, it would have been Congress. It would have been D.C., the state capital or something. I guess they were doing. I don't know if they were doing court trials or something, but they were definitely doing investigations and the researching on basically what was going on. So, history on MK Ultra. This was during the Cold War. So, you still had issues with the Soviet Union, you had issues with China, you had issues with North Korea and America. And America was apparently worried that the Soviet Union, Russia, we'll call it Russia, but at this time it was the Cold War, so it was called the Soviet Union. America was concerned that these powers were using mind control and as sort of like a not a biological weapon, but like a psychological weapon, and they could use it against whoever they wanted. which is kind of weird to think about. Honestly, it's like we're at the height of the Cold War. We're at the height of this would have been the space race too. The race to the moon and everything. And we're so concerned that Russia and China and North Korea are using mind control to basically create these, whatever you want to call them, super soldiers. And I think it's really funny because we're just like, we're super concerned about that. And we were also afraid that not only were they creating these super mind control soldier things, but they were, I say they, I mean like America was afraid of them using it against prisoners of war too. And so this is at the height of the Cold War, so 1950, and I gotta sneeze. Ooh, I thought that was gonna take longer than that. I had to sneeze. That's a way to break to break the podcast episode. I gotta sneeze. I felt the sneeze coming up, and I was like, "Oh God, I gotta sneeze so bad." Sorry, sorry guys. Um, but so yeah, in 1953, uh, how do you go back into material after that? How do you go back into the story? Ugh. I'm not editing this out. This sneeze is staying in there. I don't care. I don't care what anybody says. The sneeze stays in. Talk about MK Ultra and just start sneezing. Biological weapons and start sneezing. So yeah, 1953 rolls around, and the CIA just officially greenlights Project MK Ultra, and we're like, I'm gonna use America as like we or they or whatever, because it's America is still America regardless. And so I basically greenlit MK Ultra because of the fear of China, Soviet Union, or whatever. And so basically, the question that comes down to it is, what is Project MK Ultra? MK Ultra was a program that went, like I mentioned earlier, it went beyond the use of watches and chains and all of this, and they used more crazier methods that we would actually maybe consider inhumane today, or maybe not. I guess it depends on where your mind is at. It depends on how you were raised, who your family is, I guess. But they went far beyond the use of watches and chains and everything, like the chain, the watch on the chain, and all this. They started experimenting with LSD, drugs, and using this LSD, they would use the commands like you're getting sleepy, your whole body is going relaxed, you're close your eyes, use the LSD, like get the LSD first, close your eyes, your whole body is going relaxed, your whole body is going numb, blah blah blah. We've heard this all before, like the hypnotist. When you can go on YouTube and like look up this hypnotist, like you're getting really sleepy, you're getting really really tired, and all this and whatever and blah blah blah, and that was basically what they were doing, but they were using LSD on top of that, so you can really only imagine just the effects of that. Not saying I've never personally been on LSD. I'm sure there's people who have, and I'm sure you understand better than some about the effects of LSD and what it is. So the further I got into this, the further down the rabbit hole I guess I went into. Have you ever seen Captain America, the Winter Soldier? That's basically what this reminded me of, because you had Bucky, who basically goes through the exact same thing. And I think that if you were to break open the iceberg of Avengers and the timeline of Captain America, Avengers, and MK Ultra and everything, it really fits into it, because Now I'm going to bring fantasy into a freaking conspiracy thing. Anyways, yeah, it's a damn good example. Because, obviously Captain America takes place during World War II, which would have been when MK Ultra started. So that's why I use that example, but it's kind of a stupid example. It's a fantasy example. But basically what they wanted to do is you take a subject, you isolate them, you make them relax, and then you play propaganda on a loop. So they were like experimenting with psychedelic drugs, paralytics, electroshock therapy. That's why I said earlier it would seem inhumane to us today, but this is what they were doing way back then. And it started in the 1940s. So when you think 1940s, what do you think of? You think of Nazi Germany. That's where it's kind of where it started. Because I also and I'll mention this later on, but they used the drugs, the paralytics, the electroshock therapy, LSD. That's where it's originated. It's where it started, and some subjects knew that they were taking part in this, but a lot of them actually did not. A lot of them had no idea that they were taking part in this. And they would use hallucinogens. I'm going to say this wrong. Hallucinogens. Whatever. Hallucinogens. They would use those afterwards to basically, the idea was to wipe out memories. And they would use these LSD, electroshock therapy, which is fucking crazy to watch. I think I've seen a video of it somewhere. It's fucking crazy. There's like there's electroshock therapy, and then there's like hydroshock therapy or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. But I've seen a lot of these videos happen, and it's gross. It's gross what we did as a country. As a country, it's gross. I guess that's the point of this podcast too, is to highlight just how gross and ugly our American history is. How gross is America? Yeah, let's listen to this podcast. But like I said, there were some people that knew that they were partaking in this experiment, and there were a lot of others that didn't. Those were the subjects that were working on. And when the LSD took place, the hallucinogens took place and everything, it would wipe out memories. So there's a doctor who was involved in this. His name was Dr. Jolly. That was his actual name. It was Dr. Jolly or Professor Jolly or something like that. Sounds like a clown, but maybe he was. But Dr. Jolly, I think he testified or something about how he was able to use this method. He didn't fully come out and say that he was involved in MK Ultra. He never admitted that he was involved in it. But there were a lot of people that knew about it. And he did admit one thing, that he was able to replace old memories with fabricated memories. So what that entails is he would use the LSD program. He would use the psychedelic drugs, the electroshock therapy, the propaganda on a loop, and he would use that to push out real memories and replace them with fake fabricated memories. So that's why I brought up Captain America, because anybody who's seen Captain America Winter Soldier, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But you push out not per se like positive memories, but just real memories. So basically what they were, to give you a broad idea of what they were doing, in my perspective, what I think they were doing is, say you take a happy memory, like let's say you have a good memory of riding a bike for the first time. Anybody riding the bike for the first time. And then you get put into the MK Ultra program, or whatever they called it at that time. You get put into that program, and then they replace that memory, so you're no longer having the memory of riding a bike, but you have a memory of riding a bike, but then they put in that you actually got struck by a car or something, but you don't remember getting hit by a car. Only they do, because they fabricated it. They planted it in your brain. You remember riding the bike, but you don't remember getting hit by the car. That's my perspective. I think that's kind of what they were going for, what they were doing when it came to like fabricating memories and whatnot. And the crazy thing that I thought, or that I heard about in these documentaries on, there was one man who was on Joe Rogan. I'm not going to mention his name. One gentleman who was on Joe Rogan came out and discussed all about this topic as well. So I was listening to that entire episode, and that was really good, actually. But they would conduct these experiments in the 3 places that anybody would think that you would conduct an experiment like this. And this is going to blow your mind, because it blew mine. They would conduct these experiments in prisons, hospitals, and universities. So prisons, hospitals, and universities throughout the 1950s and 60s. So 20 years. 20 years of doing these experiments in hospitals, probably mental hospitals, prisons, universities, high security prisons, minimum security prisons, and that is just, it's inhumane, to be, if we're being honest. It is very inhumane, because this is gonna sound completely horrible, but when you think about, I brought up Nazi Germany earlier, and this is where it kind of started. You think about the concentration camps, and you think about how they would be doing experiments on, like, different experiments in the concentration camps. And this actually got brought up too. It got brought up that the MK Ultra program was also being worked on, sort of in its infancy. It was being worked on in concentration camps. And that is when I mentioned like prisons and universities and hospitals and everything. It's basically, it was a prison. It was pretty much a prison, and they were conducting these experiments. It's not, I read it somewhere. It's not like a confirmed thing. I read it somewhere that Auschwitz got mentioned about the MK Ultra program. So it's not a confirmed thing, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it either, because you're thinking of Auschwitz, you're thinking of the concentration camps and everything. You have these experiments that they were doing on the prisoners, on twins, all that. Why don't we do MK Ultra on top of that? And if you watched my last episode about JFK assassination, I did mention Lee Harvey Oswald a little bit about how he did not have any recollection or anything of killing JFK. Now, that could have been an only thing like, did you steal this candy bar? No, I didn't steal the candy bar. That could be that thing too. But he's just trying to save his own ass. But when Oswald got arrested, or shortly after he got arrested, in between the 2 days before he got shot, which is weird, he got asked a question. He was like, "Did you kill JFK?" He was like, "No, they're pinning this on me, and I didn't kill anybody or anything like that." And the person that killed him, Jack Ruby, also said that after killing Oswald, he was what was he? He was a disco club owner. Yeah, a nightclub owner. And he comes up and kills Oswald in broad daylight in front of so many cops. And afterwards, he doesn't know why. You're a nightclub owner, you come up and just kill somebody in broad daylight, and then when you're asked about it, you don't know why. Doesn't make any sense. And what I mentioned too is like we were during the Cold War, and Oswald had ties to the Soviet Union. And if you remember, so we were during the Cold War, we were afraid of the Soviet Union, China, and Russia. The Soviet Union, China, and North Korea. And Oswald had ties to Russia. So, was he being framed? Was he going to release something that wasn't supposed to be released? We don't know. We'll never know. And I have another sneeze coming up. Oh my gosh. You're a sneeze. I'm not editing these sneezes out. These sneezes are staying in. But yeah, it begs the question is like, was he influenced to do this? Was he sent in from the CIA to conduct this after MK Ultra was performed on him, to become an assassin, kill the president, and then while he was locked up, we would just be like, Flash, you guys seen Men in Black? The little flashy thing that they have, the little clicky thing, you click it, sends like a bright white light. Like that. It's like you conduct something and then flash and then gone. It's kind of like that. Or at least I think it's like that. But see, it's like, was he influenced to do this? Was he going to reveal some really serious information that the CIA did not want him to reveal. We don't know. We don't know. And that was in 1963. So this was 9 years. 9 years before MK Ultra went classified. So this was like kind of in between it. And but yeah, that was a weird one when that got mentioned. And it kind of makes you question everything else too. I question everything anyways. But it makes you question everything else too. And the other one, there was two of them. There was not only the JFK one that was involved in that, but there was another one that got brought up. And when I heard this, I lost my mind. My mind was gone. One of the names that got brought up in the MK Ultra experiment was, you'll never guess, Charles Manson. This is gonna be crazy. I know. Anybody listening to this, your jaw is gonna be like, oh, "What? Charles Manson? Yeah, Charles Manson." All right, here we go. So, as the project continued, as they went into this whole thing, this was already years into it. So Manson was what, 60? When did the Charles Manson murders start? I don't remember. I think it was sometime during the JFK assassination, I believe. When was the Manson murders? I don't know much about Charles Manson, which is a good thing. But I think the Manson murders started sometime after the JFK assassination, or I could be wrong, I'm not sure. But after they started doing these experiments, they went into harder drugs. So they went into what are you doing? They would go into LSD. They were already tampering with ecstasy, mescaline, heroin, meth, and some other ones. And they were already doing like the psychedelics, the electroshock therapy, all of this. And we get introduced to Charles Manson. And my timeline is very off, roughly off. I don't exactly know when the family started, but Manson would conduct, or he would have his family. He never did any murders. He was never convicted of any murders. It was the family that did it. So he would have the family go off, do the murders, all of the Sharon Tate, all of those murders and everything. And every time a crime would come up and he was convicted of it, he went to trial. That trial got sentenced. He got sentenced, went to jail, and he was released. Every single time he was released. I don't exactly know how long his longest jail sentence was, but he got released every single time. He was criminally charged all the time for whatever his family did, and he got released every single time. So, I mentioned someone's name earlier, Dr. Jolly. Dr. Jolly was his psychiatrist. And Dr. Jolly was in charge of Project MK Ultra. Put the puzzle pieces together. You have this person who has this family that does these committing acts, and Dr. Jolly becomes his psychiatrist. Dr. Jolly had access to prisons, to universities, to hospitals. He would have been around Charles Manson. And it was also said, my nose is running. It was also said that people knew Charles Manson. They called him Charlie. He would come into the facilities with the women, the family, and they knew who he was. It's like, the big question is, did they create Charles Manson? He might have been, it's hard to say. He might have been a little bit fucked up, but did they create Charles Manson? That's the big question. Did they create Lee Harvey Oswald? Big question. Some of these icebergs, spiderwebs that go out to the criminals and the maybe not serial killers. I don't think that wouldn't classify as that. None of those people got brought up. It was only Charles Manson, which is weird. But did they create them? That's the big question. Because the idea of Project MKUltra was to create CIA super assassins. The idea was to take somebody randomly, do this on them, and there was a story that got told that they would have key phrases. You know how when somebody's under, or they're not under yet, you like snap your fingers and they're like, attention, whatever. And you say a magic word and they're like, oh, like that, whatever. It's kind of like that. So if they needed somebody to bring in classified documents into, I don't know, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, they would send the person off, fly them to France, Germany, whatever, with these classified documents. They would meet somebody over there. They would say the key phrase, hand over the documents. They say the key phrase again, come back, wipe out the person's memory. Away they go. They don't know who they are. Their memory is completely wiped out. They don't know who they are or where they were. That was the point of MKUltra. And there is another project that is so funny. There was a project that was branched off from MKUltra. It was I cannot remember for the life of me. I have to look this up. I can't remember what it is. It's it is Midnight Climax. Oh god. So I heard about this one too, and I thought it was great. I was like, okay, this is pretty fascinating. So there was a side project from MKUltra called Operation Midnight Climax. Okay. Your imagination is serving you well. Midnight Climax was an experiment that they performed with LSD they would use prostitutes, and they would use Johns, guys, I guess. They would bring them to these facilities and put these guys into a room by themselves. Cameras, I'm sure, everywhere. Put these guys into a room, and then the prostitute, hooker, whatever you want to call them, would go off to a separate room where she would get ready. They would drop the LSD or inject the person with LSD without them knowing it in the room. The LSD would take effect. They would do their whatever you want to call it. The prostitute comes in. They have sex. And there's a bunch of guys outside with clipboards monitoring what the LSD does for sex. Hence the name Midnight Climax. When I heard about this, I was like, wow. Like that's as far as they went. They wanted to see what the effects of LSD did to having sex. And I was like, I've never heard of anything like this before. And this is something that is just another black mark on American history. Another smudge on American history. And there was also something with like college kids. I mentioned universities. The college students would lure, because this was during the hippie age, like the 1960s, Vietnam War and everything. And these colleges and universities would get told, like the college students would get told, try and lure people in, wear your hair gross, wear baggy jeans or something like that, and try and lure these people in, and take them to this place that looks like a hippie hangout, and they would shock them up with LSD and everything, and they would study the effects of this, and it was like, have at it. And this is something that happened on a regular basis. And all of a sudden, in 1974, it became classified information. It was all classified. Documents got shredded, all of this. But this information is on the World Wide Web. You can go on Google right now and look it up. So it's not that classified. But then again, it's been like since 1975. But yeah, this is such a it's just crazy. It's another crazy mark that America has on its history. And yeah, it's just fucking weird. But just thinking about that, thinking about going through the psychological torture, the brainwashing, the psychological torture and everything, and then coming out of that and you don't know what happened. You don't know where you were. You don't know where you've been. That sucks. That really sucks. But this was fun. This is a good episode. I think that's all the time we got for this episode. We did it. Episode number 2. Episode number 2 about brainwashing and mind control. Yeah, it's a good one. brainwashing and mind control. Listen to me talk about brainwashing and mind control. But yeah, it was something that I literally just learned about like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. I remember. And I really, really, really wanted to do a video on it because it's so strange to think about that. And like I said, when I first heard about it, I was like, Captain America, Winter Soldier, man. And then also like Natasha. Marvel fans, you guys will get it. But Natasha was a Russian spy, and she was programmed to do this, to be like a Russian spy or whatever. And yeah, it's the whole thing, man. It's very similar, very like parallel. So, but I think that's all the time I got for you guys. That's all the time I got for this episode. And it was fun. We talked for a little bit, had a good conversation. And I will be signing off. Next episode is next Sunday. And that episode is going to be tough. That's going to be a tough episode to do. Even though it was so long ago. Not really. 20 years. 24 years. Something like that. It's not so long ago. It's going to be a tough one. One of the tough ones that I'm going to be doing. So, anyways, guys, that is all the time I have for you. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something new with my videos. I hope you learned some history, and I hope I blow your mind. So with that being said, GraveWalkers podcast is signing off.